Hello, faithful, and welcome to Heaven Metal Magazine's YouTube channel. And tonight, Mr. Jeff McCormack and myself are going to be counting down, well, not really counting down, but we're going to be discussing our 5 favorite releases of 1986. 1986 was really a seminal year in Christian music, the hard rock and metal categories, and we've tried to get some other people to come on with us from the Heavens Metal crew, but alas, we're the only 2 standing at the moment. So we'll continue to be doing these shows. Hey, let us know if you like it in the comments below. Don't forget to list what your 5 favorite Christian metal, hard rock, rock albums from 1986 are in the albums below, comments below. So let's get cracking. How's it going, Jeff?
Going fine. Yeah, we had, like you said, we've been trying to get some other people on. It's tough, though, because the people in the crew we're located all over the world. And so, I mean, you know, Kev's out in California. I'm over here on the East Coast of Virginia. It's just tough to get a time frame. But we're hopefully going to get, and since this is so new, people haven't, you know, got it scheduled. So we're going to try to get that going. But like you said, 86, I was pulling. I'm like, where do I stop? I mean, in 86, not only was I early on in my Christian realm of music, because I got into Christian music in 85, but I was absorbing everything. And it's like, where do I stop? There were so many great releases, but then when it comes just to Christian metal, some of the most pivotal bands that have still to this day have near and dear places in our hearts, they started in 86. So I think we're probably going to have a lot of duplicates here to talk about tonight, but there is just so much. And as we mentioned off air, it gets worse with years to follow. So
yeah, definitely. There are a lot of bands that 86 was kind of that breakthrough year. I know there will be one band in particular, and I'm kind of thinking maybe we'll save that one for later in the show. But, you know, there are just a huge array of hard rock, heavy metal, melodic stuff, heavier stuff. And it really, this year opened the floodgates for what was to come in 87 and in 88. So.
Yeah, it got worse from there for sure. As we talked in our previous one, 85 was kind of the start. Even though, you know, we had Stryper in 84, that was kind of like what knocked on the door. And then 85, just the door started to really open. And in 86, the floodgates started, and it just got
absolutely.
And we
we'll do.
I said we
probably do kind of a. Oh, I'm sorry.
I said we probably should have talked about which one you were talking about, one to skip, but I think I might know which one we're going with, so I'm going to put this one to the side.
All right. So let's count it down now, folks. Remember, this is in no particular order as far as, you know, our personal preferences. It's what we like. You know, we're not saying one is bad or good or better than the other. It's just, this is some of our personal preferences. And frankly, it's kind of hard. All of these releases have a very favorite, near and dear part in, I'm sure, in my heart, and I know in Jeff's heart too. You know, I mean, it's like, how can you not? 35 years ago, let's think about that. 35 years ago, and we're still talking about this stuff.
Old.
Yeah, thanks.
But yeah, like you say, it's the tough thing is that there was so much music in all realms, and, you know, and Christian music, not only in the hard rock and metal, but it's like even on the just on the rock side of things, there were still a lot of up and coming bands on that. So it was really tough. These are not top 5. These are just 5 favorites that we found, because, and they're not ranked, like you said, they're not in any particular order, because it's like ranking your kids. You don't, these are just out, and I'm telling you, it was hard to do because there were so many great albums that I listened to death. To choose 5, it was tough. And I think we're going to end up going a little over because I got more than 5, but there's just some honorable mentions, some bands that need to get a little attention. So
absolutely.
Great stuff. Great year.
So Jeff, you want to start with your first one then?
Gosh, so hard. Okay. Where to go? Okay. I'm going to go with this. One of the, and I've told this story, I think, in our last video, because 85 was where there were only a few albums that came out. And so when I started just buying Christian music, there were a couple bands, and this was one of them. But 86 is when they released an album that still, I think, is everybody's favorite, and that's Messiah Prophet. So hopefully this wasn't the one you wanted to skip. But Master of the Metal. So the first album, Rock the Flock, when I first did my whole switch over to just Christian music, like I had mentioned, I think previously, there were only a couple bands that I could buy. The first Saint album, first Messiah Prophet album, the first Leviticus album. They were just, and Stryper, of course. But so this one came out the next year, and it just blew us all away. Slightly different, well, quite a change in pace as far as the style. They were a little more metal, a little less of the hard rock. And then I showed this in a video that I made on my YouTube channel the other day, but the Messiah Prophet button.
Oh, nice.
Now, the thing about this, and there's two of them I showed, is on the back of them, there's these little numbers on the back, because these were issued when you become a member of the fan club. That's how impressive this album was. I joined the fan club, not only I, but I and my wife. And what that meant actually was we were sending the band money every month. We were like, donors, supporters, and they would send us stuff back. But this album just blew us away. And it just was one, and still to this day, my wife will tell you, if I drug her in here, this is still one of her favorite albums. And it is definitely a little more on the metal side than the Rock the Flock, but it's melodic metal. It's a little sludgy. It would have been great had this album had a little more money behind it on production. It lacked a little there, but back in the day, we didn't care. We just thought that this was an amazing, amazing album. And yeah, there you go. I have the CD here somewhere too, but anyway, so I'm going to throw that as my first one. It just, you've got all the classic tracks, Heavy Metal Thunder. I mean, I don't know. I could rant on and on about the show. I mean, about the album. Now, I believe it was these guys also played at Cornerstone in 86 the same year, I believe, with a lot of other metal bands. And so they were making the rounds, and anyway, great stuff.
Yeah.
Put that in there, just one of my favorites.
Yeah. I always thought it was heavy metal with melody without sacrificing heaviness. You really had the chugga, 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 all that down pick stuff, but the strong emphasis on hooks. It sounds like an album that came out in 85, 86. Superior to the debut. Producer Bill Grabowski. The thing that I remember when that first came out, I kept going, is this real or what? And I did a little checking out. Bill Grabowski, I had heard, he was involved with Bon Jovi. Well, actually, he has a songwriting credit on Bon Jovi's album 7800 Fahrenheit, or Fahrenheit 7800. And it's the final track on the album called Secret Dreams, the album closer. And honestly, I listened to it before we went on today, and I went, this kind of sounds a little bit like Messiah Prophet when it first starts. I mean, there's keyboards and stuff, but the guitar, when you hear it, I kind of went, yeah, okay. I mean, he's not the only songwriter. I think Sambora and John Bon Jovi have songwriting credit. Somebody else has a credit on it too. But I understood that they spent about $7,000 or $8,000 making this album, and it sold incredibly well for the brand new Pure Metal record label. And I was going to dovetail with that. That the first two releases from Pure Metal was Messiah Prophet and everybody's favorite Saint. And that is mine, Time's End. This got written up, I want to say it was either in Rip or Metal Edge back in the day, just kind of in passing. And I mean, this looks like a heavy metal album. Gotta love to me, everything that was hinted at on Warriors of the Sun came to fruition here. Josh Kramer's unbelievable vocals, John Mahan's just tremendous guitar playing. And of course, Richard Lynch, who wrote a lot of the songs. And what's interesting, a little tidbit on this, drums on this are played by Mr. Brian Willis. Brian Willis was the drummer for Quarter Flash on their debut album. He never played, as I understand it, never played with the band live, but strictly was, he was the studio drummer in this regard. You got to have a couple of Saint CDs there. This one is the original from '86, and then a couple of the reissues, including the gold disc here. That actually does sound pretty amazing. The song Steel Killer was originally written about submarines in World War II. That's from John Mayhem. But the record label said, no, can't have songs about World War II. You gotta change the lyrics. So that's when it just, kind of like, why is Satan the Steel Killer? But the other story I heard on this album was they gave the band $10,000 to make this record. They spent $4,000 to make it, and Richard Lynch used the rest of it for band stuff, whether it was gear or what have you. But that was something I had heard. It was either from John Mayhem or Jim Maxwell, who was the drummer for Valor, who also was the drummer for Saint for part of the time as well. But Brian Willis, Quarter Flash was from Oregon, from Portland. And I'm not sure exactly how, I'm guessing through the whole musical circuit, they knew each other. They were friends. If you look at his discography after Quarter Flash, he did a lot of stuff for Windham Hill. Jeff Johnson, who lived up there. Jeff Johnson was a Christian artist, that whole kind of new age type music thing, but just very interesting. And that, to me, for a record, if they only spent $4,000 on it in 1985, 86, that sounds pretty amazing to me.
Yeah, it's one of the, there were a lot of releases on Pure Metal, and not all of them were. This one is one of the better sounding Pure Metal releases for this time frame. Just put it that way. It is, and it was on my list too. This is the new remastered edition. So if you didn't get one of the multiple copies that Kevin's got there, he does have the gold edition. And then I think I have the Millennium 8 edition that had the live tracks from Cornerstone as bonus tracks. But yeah, the gold disc edition was recently reissued, as was the vinyl on, I think it's on a couple colors, I think, but here's the red.
Wow.
I remember I got this album in '86 myself. I remember living in the dorms. I remember listening to this album to death. It just had the most amazing metal sound at the time. I do, I have heard, they played at Cornerstone, Messiah Prophet. '86 was an amazing Cornerstone year. So I just had to go. We got to go. So in '87, with the Cornerstone, none of those metal bands were there. But we had Bloodgood and White Cross. But, you go there when you hear Philadelphia, Saint, Messiah Prophet, Barren Cross, all these amazing bands at Cornerstone. And then you get there and there's like not many. But, great album. Now, somebody actually, a guy who comments on some of my other YouTube videos, just last week posted the Saint Cornerstone bootleg video, which I had never seen. So I was like, that's cool. And they were just getting into the look they had a really cool look that even got, in my mind, a little more impressive with the next album. Just, they got the shiny stuff and spacey looking stuff. But yeah. So definitely a favorite. Talk about drummers. They've went through a lot of them. And now, my little, not really a claim to fame, but in the mid to late 90s, and I don't know how this all happened, but somehow I was a web designer in the late 90s, still am, but somehow Josh Kramer from Saint got a hold of me. I built his website. It was a Josh Kramer site, even though it was labeled with Saint. Saint had a site too. And I did Josh's site for a long time, up until real recently. A couple years ago, we finally pulled the plug because he wasn't active in anything. But at one point when they were recording, drawing a blank, one of the recent albums in the past 10 years, Josh was like, hey, you want to fly out and be the drummer? Because they were just, they had studio drummers. They didn't have a guy at that time.
So fun.
I almost I think, I almost was going to be on the same album. That would have been really cool. But anyway, yeah, that never happened. But yeah, I had a little contact there with Josh and everything. So
Nice.
Okay, is it my turn again?
It's your turn. Go right ahead.
All right. Some of these obviously are some of the more pivotal ones. There are so many, what I would call the B team, the second, whatever you want to call that sports analogy. But there are obviously, we're going to have to hit the big bands, and so you've got to have the Saints, the Barren Crosses, the Messiah Prophets. If you were around in this time frame, this is what was on your turntable and cassette deck and maybe CDs at the time. This is, I mean, they had and you mentioned that this last time in the 85, they had an EP in 85. All this is the EP plus some extra songs, but this came out in 86. For those of us who were not in California, like Keven, who had not heard of Barren Cross's EP until later in time, this was the introduction to our Barren Cross. And of course, everybody talked about Mike Lee's similarities, the vocal styles of Bruce Dickinson. And I don't think he does sound like that, but I don't think musically you can't really say this is Iron Maiden. But this is unadulterated, pure 80s metal, not glam, even though they got the look and everything. These are not, sleaze rock, glam rock. This is flat out heavy metal. Great stuff. Very, very, very evangelical and in your face. Later albums, they went a little more with the social issues while still maintaining some of that evangelicalism. But this one was in your Jesus Loves You, the whole thing. So that may have turned, but in the day, you got to remember, in this day when Christian rock was first starting, if you didn't do that, record labels wouldn't listen to you, bookstores wouldn't carry you, and Christians wouldn't listen to you. Because if you had a song that didn't talk about, if you didn't say Jesus in every song, people used to poo-poo that idea, sadly.
Unfortunately.
We got a lot of cheesy songs because of that. There's not any cheesy songs on this album. I think it still holds up. Barren Cross is still one of, I know they're not around anymore, but they just recently reissued on vinyl their Radio Cage album, and I've been revisiting that, still find, and that was their last album aside from a live album, but their stuff is solid from start to finish. This is where it began. This is near and dear to my heart. Somehow, because of my connection with Josh Kramer's website, later Mike Lee contacted me from Barren Cross, and I do Mike Lee's website still to this day. So I'm the website to the stars of the minor Christian bands that major bands that are no longer really around anymore. But and yeah, I talked to Mike not too long ago on my channel with the Gale Force and everything. So Barren Cross to me is just one of the pivotal bands. I would say, I don't know, they had the look, they had the sound. It's just, I just remember we wore this album out back in the day.
Yeah.
So another absolute favorite.
Yeah, that was, when I saw that, the first thing that crossed my mind back, even in 86, was blue and white. Okay, well, Stryper's yellow and black. Blue and white, that's kind of cool. And then as I got older, I was kind of like, well, maybe not, but I still liked it. But I will say this, two of my all-time favorite Barren Cross songs are on that album, and that's Dying Day. That song, you listen to that sounds like, flat out sounds like Iron Maiden. Yeah. I mean, it just does. And I remember when that album came out, I played that thing to death. And then, of course, It's All Come True, the third track in. Another brilliant song. Ray Parris's guitar playing on that song absolutely just smokes. Produced by Dino and John Elefante. This is an original Star Song CD, which unfortunately has gone the way of disc rot, unfortunately. Okay. Yeah. And then Mike Lee did, a remaster reissue of this about 6 years ago. I think it says 2014, so 7 years ago. And it's still a great sounding album.
That's the one that I have, the one he had redone. So
yeah, absolutely some fantastic stuff there.
I guess it's worth mentioning that it was reissued later. Now, I'm not as big of a fan of this release. It was redone by, was it Ronnie Montrose that did this?
Remixed by Ronnie Montrose.
Now you mentioned John Dino Elefante. Now, yes, that that is, and anybody who knows their work knows that that is a stamp of approval on anything. But now, if you're familiar with what John and Dino Elefante did to every other band after this, you may not like that. But that did not. I don't. There are some albums where you listen and it's got that signature sound of John and Dino Elefante, and this one I don't feel like goes overboard.
Right.
I love that signature sound, but it is a signature sound. It's a lot of background vocals, a lot of melody, and I don't think this album really displays that. I think this might have been in their early days of doing that, but it seems like after that, and I don't want to say cookie cutter, I really liked it, but they would take a band that sounded one way, and when they went in the studio, they came out sounding like a John and Dino Elefante album.
Yeah.
Usually good, but not always what the band wanted so much,
The follow-up, Atomic Arena, and really the third record, Stage of Control. Ah! Uh-oh. State of Control. Those records really sound like Elefante Productions.
They do sound a little more like that, for sure. State of Control, I think. It has those background vocals and stuff, so I agree. And so they're talking about this one remixed, remastered. I don't know. It was okay. Enigma was doing the same thing with Stryper, and they did it with this. And
it was to fulfill a contract, if you think about it, because what they did was Barren Cross was pretty well finished. They did their 3 records or 4 records. They did the live album and the live album and that was it, because there's 5 live tracks on that CD that wouldn't fit on Hotter Than Hell. So I have always understood that those 2 records were done really to meet contractual obligation with the label.
It sounds cleaner because the first album does have a little bit of a, it didn't seem like it had a lot of money behind it, but it sounds cleaner and crisper, but they've added some effects that I'm not real favorable of. So,
Okay. So this next one, this next one is, you mentioned earlier about there are a couple of these you just have to have on here. I don't know. This one is this is probably my favorite release by it is my favorite release by this band. And it sounds amazing compared to the earlier stuff. I'm talking about the Daniel Band with Rise Up. This record, when I heard Bethel and I heard Dan McCabe and I'm like, holy smokes, this album rocks. This really was the closest sound that Daniel Band, I think, really ever had to being a heavy metal band. They were always that hard rock, maybe at times a little proggy. The record label made them wear the studs and all that kind of stuff for the Running from the Darkness and all that kind of stuff, which they were never comfortable with. But this record, there's some great songs on here. The production sounds fantastic. I have always been a big fan of the Daniel Band, and they did the CD issue here. Retroactive did, I don't know, about 8 or 9 years ago now. On this particular one. Sounds fantastic. The thing that's most ironic here is that, and I had to go back to an interview I did. The only time I ever got to see the Daniel Band, they came to California. This was in 1986, and they played in Sacramento. It was a free concert outdoors. And I did an interview with them for White Throne magazine. This was like the second interview I ever did this is the one with Rex Carroll, my arm there, Rex Carroll on the front.
I had that.
Yeah. But that photo, yay, that was my heavy metal contribution photography wise. But the couple of things, the songs on this album, they're way more, I'll say, aggressive, a lot more energy. And the guys had told me they did that on purpose because they found that in concert, people were more active when the songs were more up. And all of these songs are really up. Two things that, song wise, my two favorite songs were Bethel and Call His Name. Both of those songs are fantastic. I love Paradise, Don't Walk Away, Rock You, My Children, Right Heart. This one had a bonus track for That's All Right. They did the song called Fight Back. And if you listen to it back in 86 when it came out, I remember I listened to it. I was working at Dearborn's Bible Bookstore. I'm downstairs. I'm checking product in. And you back then used to have the little demos, cassettes that you could listen to. So I'm listening to one, and this song comes on, Fight Back, and it sounds like Aldo Nova's song, Fantasy, the melody. Well, I asked Tony Rossi about that, and he said, because he's the songwriter, he said, I had never heard that song until other people pointed out they sounded similar. He goes, I had this melody in my head, and I just put it down. I'm like, cool. And that's what he told me in the interview. They were great guys. Loved meeting those guys. The other thing is, when I was listening to this in this Bible bookstore, I get to the last song, which is Right Heart. And I'm like, okay, last song. And then all of a sudden, this song starts playing. And I'm like, hey, that's Walk on the Water from Running from the Darkness, remixed. But it doesn't say that on the cassette. Come to find out, I asked them about that back then, is that originally it wasn't supposed to appear on the album itself. They did that music video. Apparently the mix was for the music video. And according to what they told me in the interview, but the video had been in Canada, but it hadn't quite made its way to the US. So, it was, I guess, going to come out or something. But the original press that when they sent the masters in had that version of the song. Not every cassette had that. Oh, wow. So I don't have my cassette, and I know that on one of these reissues that Matt Hunt did over at Retroactive, I believe he found a copy and was able to include it, but it sounds like it was recorded along the same time as Rise Up. Just to me, that's a record I can put it on, and instantly it takes you, it grabs you. It's a great record.
And it was on my list too. It actually, it made my top 5 of the 5 that I chose, and it bumped one down, which was really hard to do. But I do remember, because I discovered the band, I think, around Run to the Darkness. Went back and listened to, the previous albums, fell in love with them. But Run to the Darkness was a favorite. When I put this in and that scream started on the beginning, I knew we were in a different world. I remember I was in the military, used to work in the warehouse on certain days, and I had a cassette player up top, and I played this album so loud all the time. People would only care if they walked through my section. It echoes in the warehouse, but I was kind of in a section of my own. But and it's funny because, this band was always on Refuge Records, which was kind of like the rock side of what later, Pure Metal, and everybody's like, why is this not on Pure Metal? And then, oddly enough, their next album didn't quite hold up to the energy, but they were at Cornerstone 87. So I did see them. I got some live shots that were, maybe not as impressive as yours, but I was thrilled to see that. It was my number 5 on my top 5. It is definitely the high water mark for anybody that likes metal or hard rock. That is the one. But all of the Daniel Band catalog, even that they're all hard rock, they go from classic rock in the beginning to kind of just a rock and roll to a hard rock to a metal back to a hard rock. I would say all of their albums are great. And so, yeah, definitely had to be on there.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, then I'm going to go with what I'm wearing. Obviously, got to have the whole Bloodgood thing. And then I told the story on this because you showed this on the 85 thing as far as their demo. And I was not aware of that back in the day, but this was the song. This was the band that, you know, some friend of ours came and said, we heard about this band called Good Blood or something. Yeah. And so, and this again, they just reissued this earlier this year. This is one of the new limited run vinyl. He's got the original. I have an original copy too. It's on a beautiful splatter. So
wow.
if for some reason, and you can find even the copies he got, because I bought my copy just a couple years ago. He's got his autograph by David. Not fair. But if you're, you know, you need these albums, they've been reissued now. You just this year, just a couple months ago on vinyl and CD, and you've got to get it. Bloodgood, I saw them in Cornerstone 87 too. So they, again, it wasn't like it was as metal as the 86, but we had Bloodgood. We had some band called White Cross that nobody ever heard of that later just tore our faces off on every album. And so we had two really great metal bands, and then we had Daniel Band and a lot of other good rock bands at the time. So, but yeah, so this was, you know, yeah. And I think I've got at least two of those. I know I got the one on the bottom, that reissue. So, yeah, with the extra do you have the bonus disc?
Yes.
Okay.
Gotta have the bonus disc.
Yeah.
This has got
it's kind of a rough mix, but
this one was a recording. This was soundboard recording for Mr. David Matillo up in Washington. Yeah. He was their press guy for a long time.
And he was in the scene a lot back then. He wrote for magazines and stuff. So
yeah, I met him. We went to the first His Festival together.
Okay.
Yeah. So
2019 reissue, which is one of the ones you're showing there that just was, and then the one you just showed, which is that, which you're not going to find any more of the Millennium Intense with the bonus disc. So
right.
That's an original, I guess, huh?
Yeah. This one's an original from 86 on Frontline. I wish, the one thing I wish on this album, which is on my list too, I wish David Safiro would have soloed more. I love this record. I played this thing to death, but like, except the Lamb, there's no guitar solo. And to me, David Safiro was like listening to Steve Vai or somebody like that. Just incredible guitarist. And the songs are all really, you know, they're all in that 3 to 4 minute time frame. And, you know, I loved Black Snake. When that came on, it was like, oh my gosh, this is like speed metal, thrash metal. This is amazing.
It was the Bloodgood thrash metal song. So, but no, I agree. Yeah, I mean, this album still, it just, anyway, yeah, I won't say anything else. A great album. And like I say, back in the day when it came out, there were some, yeah. I
can't remember. Did I tell that story about this in the last video?
I don't think so. You would mention the 85 Metal Missionaries, but I don't think I remember a picture being discussed.
So in 86, I'm working again at Dearborn's Bible Bookstore, which doesn't exist anymore. It was in Hayward, California. Michael Bloodgood had family that lived in Berkeley, apparently, and he was down visiting. And on one of my days off, I wasn't there at the store. He had been calling around local Bible bookstores because he came down. He had friends going, well, give me your album. I'd like to hear it. He didn't have any copies. So he started calling around and nobody had it. But then he called Dearborn's. Oh, yeah, we got it. Da, 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 da. So he comes down to the store, comes in and says, oh, yeah, hi, I'm Michael Bloodgood. I called apparently, and I'm looking for, so I don't know. Yeah, right. So he bought whatever we had, and a couple of the ladies there had said, oh, there's a guy here that works here. He knows everything about your record, everything. And that's what they told me. So I remember I came back in to work, and all of a sudden the ladies bring me, there's a t-shirt, which is long gone. It's the original Bloodgood shirt that had their their picture, and it just said Bloodgood. It's like, I think the back photo of on the Metal Missionaries, maybe. Anyway, picture, and then a t-shirt and this photo. And I was like freaking out. And it just said, Keven, keep rocking for Jesus, Michael Bloodgood. And I've always kept this. And I just, that was one of those records, very pivotal. So it was on my list too, but I'll talk about something else. So this next one is a release that I don't have a copy of. I have digital files. I used to have a copy of this, and it's long gone. I call it the Great Purge of 2002. I had to sell a bunch of stuff to pay bills back then, and one of those things was a demo cassette by a band from Ohio called Tempest. Now, that band released a 4-song, technically 7 songs, but a 4-song demo tape called Annihilation of the Wicked. And it came out in 1986. The demo itself was incredibly rare. I remember having I was tape trading with some friends, and someone had copied it, and I had it. And then one year at Cornerstone, Dave Johnson from White Throne said someone came up to him and had a box of 20 cassettes, and he bought all 20. He said, I think you might be in it, bought all 20, gave me one, or I bought it from him, whatever it was. If you have never heard this stuff, it sounds like technical thrash metal, not for the speed, but it features, they were a 3-piece. Warren Harris on bass and vocals, who actually went on to become a real famous house techno jazz producer under the moniker of Hannah. Also had guitarist Kevin Michael Felt and drummer Timothy Andrew Burris. Nothing else sounds like this. I mean, part of me goes, if you really knew the underground, maybe Watchtower from Texas. It is, the lyrics are right out of the Old Testament. It is full on. If you thought Saint was fire and brimstone, Tempest goes a step beyond that. There was a full press kit that we already mentioned, Dave Matillo, but David Matillo has it, or used to have it, had photos.
Wow.
In that kit. One of the photos, I believe, was either Warren or the band. They were stabbing a satanic Bible, and blood was coming out of the Bible. They were killing the beast. There was an issue of Metal Hammer that I used to have, because I bought it because on the cover it said Tempest, and I think it had a little cutout photo of Warren Harris, and they showed some of the photos from that press kit. One of them was him holding like a skull with a cross, hill of the skull. There was another one there, and this is going to raise all kinds of hackles now, but there was a photo. It was an upside down cross burning on fire. Warren was standing in front of it, and it was just all about destroying Satan. That was the intent. And I'm not sure if this demo is on YouTube at all. Because there are a lot of people, this is something also that has been both Bill Rocks and Matt Hunt have tried to reissue it. The band does not want it reissued. It is never going to happen. But it is before Deliverance, before Vengeance, any of that. This stuff, I mean, it sounds like something you would have found in 1986 in an import bin somewhere. And it was funny because in the Metal Hammer article, I remember that it was like a 2-page thing. You opened it and there were these pictures, and they raved all about it. And they were like, the album is due imminently. Well, that was just wishful thinking, because I think the band had broken up by the time that issue of Metal Hammer came out. But to me, and then of course and it is a true story that the guys at Pure Metal Records.
No, I was going to tell this if you didn't.
Yes, Dave Johnson told me that he had talked with the people of Pure Metal. Yes, we signed Tempest. They're from Pennsylvania or whatever. And it's like, no, Tempest is from Ohio.
Actually,
and they're
Indiana.
And they're like, well, who did we sign? Jamie Rowe's band, Tempest, the pop metal band. And we were just like, how does Pure Metal survive when they don't even know who is who? Yeah. But it is what it is. And, the Annihilation of the Wicked, definitely one of my favorite releases of 1986.
And same here. Now there was an original, I guess, copy of it, had a color cover, and then the one that I ultimately bought was a black and white, which they say was either a second pressing or it even could have been. I don't want to say it's a bootleg because it was real professional looking. But yeah, the bass playing on that is phenomenal, just freaky crazy. Now you mentioned Dave Johnson got a box of them at Cornerstone. Do you remember roughly when that was? Was that maybe 87-ish?
Probably 87-ish. He had told me that there were some people that he knew would be interested, and so that's why he bought it. And
okay, because I'm almost sure that's when I got mine, and I probably got it from Dave Johnson at Cornerstone.
Probably because you were doing the Pendragon, right?
At that time, I wasn't. I was just I didn't start that until like 88. But I was a subscriber to White Throne, and I met Dave Johnson at Cornerstone. He gave me some, as I mentioned, I think before, he gave me some of those tapes, the bootlegs, Live Deliverance and Holy Soldier, I don't know, some Guardian. But now that you tell the story about him getting a box of them, I'm thinking that's where I got mine, because that sounds like the same story that I'm for some reason recollecting. Because I got a copy of it, and it turned out to be the one with the black and white cover.
Yeah, that's what I had.
And I had I don't want to say it's a great purge, but as I mentioned before offline, that I sold most of my demos probably 4-5 years ago. And I sold that, and it brought in big money because it is well sought after. And yeah, I mean, it's sad that they don't want that released, but it's got 4 greats. There was 4 songs and then 3 bass solos, right? Or was it 3 songs?
Yeah. The side 1 had 4 complete songs. Side 2, there were 3 bass solos or instrumentals, but it was all bass.
Yeah.
And some of that stuff, it was just like, how in the world? And now Warren Harris is not even, I understood that back then at one point he basically ended up going to a church where rock music was of the devil, and that was kind of led to the end of that band. And I don't know, again, that was 35 years ago. And so
all right. Well, I mean, I agree, that was in the heyday, that was the most sought after tape, and it's still to this day people want it. But yeah, sadly it won't get released unless somebody bootlegs it by.
All right, so I've got 3, so you should have another one for 4, then I'll have a 4, and I'm sure our number 5 will be exactly the same.
Well, basically I think 4 that you covered I already covered, but because I had the Saint, the Barren Cross, the Bloodgood, and the Daniel band, but since
okay,
I'll bring this one in then for that, because this is the one that Daniel band knocked off my top 5. So I've shown the 4 that were in my top 4: the Saint, the Barren Cross, the Bloodgood, and the Daniel band. And this one, what would have been in the top 5, but got bumped by Daniel band. Just not that this is a bad album, but now I listened to all the Matrix stuff prior to this, and the sound between Matrix and the first Bride album were pretty drastically different. And the production on this was a little screechy, and so at the time this came out, it didn't become as favorable or listened to as much. It was a little harsher than like Daniel band, and so so I only bumped it because of that. But it is a pivotal release by a pivotal band that went on to, well, they're still around. So their recent album last year is probably one of their best. So and this one, I picked this vinyl literally about 3 months ago, maybe 4 months ago.
Oh, wow.
I found a used copy, this because they're reissuing a lot of the Bride stuff, and rumor has it this will be reissued soon. But I saw it in a store across the water. We went over there, and I'm like, I gotta rescue it. I have to rescue it, right? Yeah. Well, I'm gonna
Lyric sheet.
I'm going to one up you. Not only do I have a lyric sheet, but when I bought this at the record store and flipped it over,
Wow.
it says, "Thanks a lot, Jewel. Hope you enjoy, Troy T."
Wow.
So
That's awesome.
Jewel sold her copy, and Jeff got it at a store. But yeah, like you said, it's the original pure metal, and so I had to bring it home, even though I knew that there were rumors in the underground that this is coming out. I just had to have the original. So this would have been, like I say, this was in my top 5 until I realized I had to pull in Daniel Band. So I'm going to mention that one since we've already mentioned all the other great ones. So
I absolutely love this record. This to me, I mean, Evil is this is so European metal sounding. This doesn't sound like guys from Kentucky.
yeah,
This sounds like I mean, this is European heavy metal. And here's the thing with Bride, they don't sound like anybody. You know, I mean, who do they sound like? Bride.
yeah.
You know, I mean,
Fly
Away, Follow Your Heart, Show No Mercy. What a brilliant song. I Will Be With You, Thunder in the City, No Matter the Price, The First Will Be Last. I mean, there are some imperfections on this album. I overlook them. This record sounds, this came out in like November, December of '86. Because, the first you had Time's End and Master of the Metal that came out first, like in the summer, I believe. And then this came out later. It's a great record. I know that the band themselves, they're so far beyond probably any of this stuff because their style has changed so much over the last 35 years. But I love this album. The first 3 Bride records are always my favorite. Yes, I love the other stuff too. Of course, Rattlesnakes in the Playground, of course, Kinetic Faith. But I'm a metalhead, always have been. And when I found, and I heard the Matrix stuff too, it was like when I heard Follow Your Heart, then the scream. I don't know how the heck Dale screamed that scream for Follow Your Heart. Such a great song and one of the best live bands live. Yeah, absolutely.
And that album now you were saying, I love all the Bride stuff. This one sounds different than pretty much any other thing. Dale's vocal style is kind of what I say would level out. The next album sounds like a different guy, but it's probably one of the best albums too. And then the next album, he sounds even a little more different. And so yeah. But this album to me stands out as probably being just one that the vocal styles are a little intense at times, and so it kind of bumped down in my favoritism. So that's all I'm gonna say about that.
Cool. All right. So now I before we talk about honorable mention stuff, we absolutely have to. If you've been watching, folks, all the way through this, we had to talk about this record. Absolutely, the one that was released on October 24th, 1986. Go ahead.
We thought, yeah. I mean, obviously, any talk about Christian metal, you got to mention Stryper. They were the ones that really kind of kicked in the door. And '86 was their year. This was the album that I think this is probably their best-selling album. I
checked. It was certified. First, it was certified gold on February 19th, 1987. Then certified platinum on January 6th, 1988. And that was from the RIAA website. Directly.
Yeah, and if you lived during these times, you went through the frustration of the fact that this album cover was banned by most Christian bookstores because it's got the whole little pentagram, and they think they're promoting pentagram when it's just them throwing this devil-like character into the abyss. And so the CDs were made like that. The album was released with a black cover with the "To Hell with the Devil" in red. It was just real generic, and we only you could get these in certain stores, the original cover, And then in like 2010, Michael Sweet himself reissued the CD with the original cover, which is what Keven was showing there. I'm pretty sure it has been since reissued by a Japanese company that's also got the original cover. But yeah, that's going to be the kind you're going to see on the CD everywhere else around. And but yeah, and of course I've told the story before, but it was '84 when I got the first album, and then '85 when I got rid of everything else, I kept my Stryper album, and then '85 brought us Soldiers, and then this is where they really, and I saw this tour, I don't know, probably a half a dozen times. Just great stuff. And of
Yeah.
course, this is the big one. This is the MTV years. It was a crazy time for Stryper, where they were blowing up MTV and had a lot of big fan base going on. So still one of their pivotal albums. Amazing stuff.
Absolutely. I wish I'd been able to go see the 30th anniversary tour they did here a couple of years ago. That would have been a lot of fun. They played in Sacramento. I missed that show. But on the original To Hell with the Devil tour, they toured, when I saw them, they played with TNT and Loudness at the Concord Pavilion.
Wow.
And absolutely they were fantastic. I had seen them first at Wolfgang's in San Francisco. Then I got to see them on Soldiers Under Command at the Concord Pavilion, where it was maybe half full. And then on this tour, because you had a nice package, it was probably 2/3 or more. And I think that place back then, I want to say 10,000 people. So it might have been more, but they Calling on You, Free, Honestly. But the songs for me that I love on this album, the title track, To Hell with the Devil, The Way. I mean, Oz Fox's song, The Way.
Metal right there.
Oh, yeah. At full on. I like the sing-along song.
Yes.
Rocking the World. Great song. More Than a Man. I mean, that sounds like a little bit kind of like UFO, Lights Out, I suppose, but it's so heavy. The lyrics on the record, of course, are straight. Everyone points to Calling on You, where it's kind of ambivalent or ambiguous, but listen to the rest of the record.
Yeah.
It sold 1 million records, and there's some fantastic stuff on here. And what's kind of funny, I remember back then, because remember, Tim Gaines left, and they had brought in Matt Urich, who used to be the bass player for Leatherwolf. And what's kind of weird, and not weird, but we were looking at the back of the album jacket, and it just, some of the stuff, it's like Tim's arm, it's airbrushed here, and we're kind of going, so was that really Matt Urich? Because there were photos of Matt in this in the getup, and so did they just superimpose Tim's face and everything over the I don't know, but it was like I used to have the 7-inch singles. They had the gold singles for Free and Calling on You. Then they had the 12-inch singles, that were colored, clear. What was funny too, because this is the only cassette one I still have, is for Honestly, which I'm sorry is not my favorite song on this album. But what they kept doing was, on the flip sides of these, it's got the live tracks from the Live in Japan video. And so every time they would release a single, the flip side is a live track they'd taken from the Live in Japan video. But with this record, it wasn't just Christian people buying this music. They crossed all kinds of boundaries that, Christians in general have been trying to cross forever. POD did it in 2000, Skillet continues to do it, and not with little success. We're talking, both of those bands have sold millions of records. And Stryper, Amy Grant was right before this with Unguarded. But this record, it's a classic for a reason. And it broke down a lot of doors. And, you know, it showed that these guys are a world-class band, period. They can play on the same stage as anybody in the world.
And they still sound just
They still do.
They are still releasing music. But yeah, so I saw them a couple times on the Soldiers tour, and they were playing like college auditoriums and small theaters, like 1,000 seats. And then they came out with The Hell with the Devil, and they started getting a little more popular, and I saw them in the bigger arenas. And when I saw them, I don't remember all the bands that opened, but I do remember Hurricane opened for them, because I remember saying, hey, there's Rudy Sarzo's brother and Carlos Cavazzo's brother. You know, so I remember that on one of the shows, but I don't recall. Usually, all of my memories of the mini shows I saw by them, that's the only thing was them. I saw them the one year before that, literally in a little nightclub, standing right at the stage. We went there ahead of time, met them, saw them eat at Pizza Hut. It was a little club. And then the next year, you know, boom, just exploded. So
yeah, they did like a New Year's Eve show on this tour up in San Jose. And I think that show Alcatraz opened up for them, but it was Steve Vai, I think I can't remember. Yingve was gone. And I can't remember who it was that was playing. It might've been Steve. I didn't pay much attention because honestly, I really wasn't interested. Now I'm kind of like, I could have saw an Alcatraz with Steve Vai and I wasn't paying attention.
Yeah, that would have been around that time, because when Yngwie left, it was Steve Vai. So that probably would have been around that year. So yeah, I saw him with the Soldier guys, you know, which was a lot of fun because Rick would say, oh, listen to that. Oh, look at that, you know. Talk about the guitar parts.
Yeah, right. So, okay. So do you have any other just honorable mentions?
A whole bunch of them. So yeah, 85, 86 it just started exploding. 85 was bad enough. 86 started exploding. And here's some ones that I still own them. So they must be still, in my opinion, really good. And I'm going to pull up Barnabas because this is the end of Barnabas. And I got only reason bringing this up is because back in the day when I first, as I've mentioned, when I first got rid of secular music and started just listening to Christian music, the only things I was available to get at the time that were available were, as I mentioned, the First Saint, the First Messiah Prophet, the First Leviticus, and the Barnabas releases, Feel the Fire, Approaching, you know, all that. Those were my world, Barnabas. 86, this rolls around. Brief story. I am visiting my girlfriend, who is now my wife, who is stationed in Oklahoma City. I'm stationed in Mississippi. I fly to Oklahoma City. I go to an Oklahoma City Christian bookstore because they're on every corner in Oklahoma City. And they have this Barnabas album, right? I didn't realize it had even come out. I knew it was coming, Bought it. So looking at the back of it, somewhere on here, it says something about it being recorded in a studio in Oklahoma City. And I'm like, oh, no way. What do? We put out the phone book. For you kids who don't know what that is, ask your mom and dad. But phone book, open the phone book in Oklahoma City, flip through the pages, look up man, found out that Nancy and her husband lived outside, just outside the Oklahoma City area. Picked up the phone, called, Nancy answered. She invited us over, my girlfriend at the time, and I went and spent the whole day talking to Nancy. Later, her husband came home. Later, the drummer Chris came over. We ordered Little Caesars pizza. We watched Amadeus, stupidest movie in the world. We watched Amadeus, Little Caesars, and talked about how they didn't even know the album had been released. She said, really? The album's out now? The band was on their way out. The label messed them over. This was recorded. They never knew it was released. And she's like, the album's out? I'm like, yeah, it just came out. So anyway, it's, they got some great albums. I don't think this is as bad. A lot of people knock the production a little bit. I still think it's a great album. And it's just, it got a lot of play for me back in the day. And my story of being able to go, and Nancy, we're Facebook friends, and she still remembers me and my lovely little wife spending a day with her and stuff. So
when I worked at the Bible bookstore, back then the record reps would come to the store every 3 months or so, basically every quarter. Here's the new stuff that's coming out. And I would see the catalog stuff. They wouldn't come talk to me. They'd come talk to the buyer, but I'd end up talking to the reps anyway. And it kept saying Barnabas, Little Foxes, Barnabas, little, and it was like it was put on like the 85, and then it was pushed again to 86, and then to 86 later, and I'm like, is this record ever coming out? And then all of a sudden it just kind of showed up, and it was just kind of here and gone.
Yeah, didn't sadly the end of the era for the band.
Yeah. So I kind of have probably only one or two honorable mentions. One of them I'll mention primarily because this is a debut, and there's really only 3 or 4 songs on her that I really like. But for the time, I had a lot of people that came into the bookstore and were like, man, these guys are great. And that would be Idle Cure. That debut. Yep. And what's funny is that I love, of course, the opening song, Breakaway. What a great song. But Overdrive and Come Alive are high energy 80s hard rock. Idle Cure has never sounded like Def Leppard. To me, they were always that kind of Foreigner, Survivor, Journey. They have a very melodic sense, but there would be a lot of energy in their music, and it's a great record. I had a CD of it around here somewhere, but I think it fell into a black hole. But it's and of course Chuck King, who went on to join with Ken Tamplin, they formed Shout. But Frontline Records, this was 1986. The first Bloodgood record was on Frontline. There was no Intense Records at that point. And this was one of these things. It's brand new. They were distributed by Benson Records. Benson, one of the big distributors like Sparrow or Word. Benson distributed Refuge. And then you had like Light Records, and there was Spectra and all this. There was just a huge hodgepodge of stuff. But this is a great 80s sounding, and the songs themselves still hold up. And I actually went back and I listened to some of those Frontline rewinds. They did 1 or 2 episodes with the guys from Shout from Idle Cure, and it really adds a lot to that story. Oh, wow. So really cool stuff.
Well, I would say that was one of my honorable mentions too. But at the time, that album they cheated us, because the single that was released everywhere was Breakaway, and you get the album, and that's the only song on the album that sounds anything like that heavy. But I agree, it's a great album, but Breakaway is not what the album sounds like. That is like a heavy metal song on a pop album. Not that, it's pretty drastic. And then, but their subsequent albums after that, they were a little more consistent. Maybe they did have a little Def Leppard vibe, because they were hard rock, but still very melodic. And so it's a great album. Still love their stuff. I do want to mention one more, because this is going to get a lot of hate probably. 1986, I saw a little ad. I'm pretty sure it was CCM magazine. Talks about music the devil hates. I don't know. It was intriguing enough to where I placed an order and bought this little single.
Oh my!
Now, 2 songs, "Rock On" and "Surprise." The next year they released a full album, which I actually showed in one of my videos the other day, because I was showing in my video some buttons I have. Oh, right here I have a button that says AOG, and you can't see it from here, but I don't want to take it down. Armor of God. I got it from back in the day, probably when I got this. But they released an album. They had armor on and everything. So they used to be called Stryper. They changed it because of Stryper, and now they're Strike In. And yeah, people have a lot of hate for their album. One of the songs went to the album, and both of these have been reissued, but I loved it. I love this. It's very weird. Surprise is very, I don't know, Pink Floyd. It's not really, it's just weird. It's not metal. Rock On is an anthem. Rock On, Crush Ahead of Satan on the next album, which came out the next year. I love the album. It's really, you know, the mix, the everything. I don't know. These guys used to go to, supposedly all the stories are they'd go to Motley Crue concerts carrying a giant cross and they'd preach to people. They were Christians' answer to Motley Crue because they had the look and everything. So most people say they don't hold up to that at all. But it was a great album at the time. This was the introduction, 86, 87, they came out with the full album. They actually had before the whole Kickstarter started, you could send money in to pre-order the album so that they had money to make the album. And I did that, and my name is on the insert of the album that came out after this. But this is where it started, 86. I love this single. I love these two songs, and I love the album. So I just wanted to throw that one in. You say that was the only one you had? There's only a couple more I wanted.
I have just one more I'll mention, just in passing. Striking. I always remember the ad in Metal Edge. They took a full page ad out. It was either in Rip or Metal Edge. I'm pretty sure it was Metal Edge with their promo photo. And it said, God damned Satan. And I forget the rest of it. But that took a lot of money to do that. Not to mention a lot of guts, because I remember seeing that and I heard the single and myself, I just was like, I was a little disappointed. So
I saw it seemed like it was like a little, maybe an 8-page ad, business card size of like CC. I saw it. Yeah.
So this one is, I'm mentioning it because it's 1986 and I just feel like I need to mention it. This is not my favorite album, probably one of my least favorite albums by this band, and I saw them on this tour. It was the third time I saw them, and I'm talking about Petra, Back to the Street, the first album that they produced with the Pachyderm Company, first album with John Schlitt on lead vocals after Greg Voles left. And I have not actually listened to this album in a very long, decades. And I just found that back then, it just didn't sound rock enough. Beat the System at least had guitar, even though it was all the keyboards and drum machine and everything else. So, I don't know if Louis Weaver played on this album or not. My inclination probably is not, just because it's Pachyderm. On this, I like the song Back to the Street. I did like the song Shakin' the House. But after that, I really don't remember. You Are, I Am was okay, but a lot of it just the records that came after this were awesome. But this one, I really need a CD or something to revisit that. But I just felt like 1986, it's Petra, it's not heavy metal, it's rock. But anyway.
Well, see, now for me, that I found that album because Beat the System's a great album, but it's to me, a very new wave electronica.
Yeah.
That to me was a lot more hard rock than anything Petra done before, because all the other albums, while I absolutely loved them, at that time were considered light rock. I remember listening to that all the time back in the day, and I like it. I agree. Every album after that, they just got better and better. On Fire, and just
This Means War.
This Means War. Now we're seeing some of these things getting reissued. I know that was a big deal. Girder's getting some stuff, and hopefully we'll see more.
Waiting on my box to arrive.
Oh, you ordered some of those?
Oh, I ordered all the reissues. Okay. I'm just waiting for it to get here.
I would, there's a couple. I'm hoping that they'll go with. There's a couple more that are like impossible nowadays to find on vinyl that I'd like to see. But I didn't order the new reissues yet because I have all the originals like you have there, and there's only so much money, and they keep reissuing so much stuff.
Yeah,
I couldn't get the Petra stuff. I didn't get the Res reissues yet because I have originals of all those, and it's just like there's only so much. Yeah. Okay, well, if that's your last, I'm going to mention a couple. These are definitely runners up, I guess. Okay, these are albums now.
Okay.
All right, I'm gonna listen, and it's funny because these, at least this one has been reissued. Malik, I bought this back in the day. Back in the day, it was rare to have a band release a vinyl record. It was mostly cassettes. And this was one of them that I had back in the day. This is the reissue because you can't find it. But I loved this album back in the day. So I'm going to mention that. It did just get reissued. So if you want it, vinyl and CD.
Now, is that 86?
I was looking at it. I've got it listed as 86, but I'm like, was it 86? I know it was around that time frame, and I was trying to look because I started second guess myself as you were talking. But
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, they played, Keith Miles, they did the His Festival, which was June of 87, and Holy Right played. I just didn't know that the album
doesn't seem to have a date on it, but here's the thing that makes me think that it was. I had this album and I had their newsletters when I was first married in 86. I had this album in a year or so after that. So at the worst, it could have been 87, but I have it listed and I see it listed online and I have it listed in my personal collection as being 86, but the album doesn't seem to have a date on it. But I used to get the newsletters back in, I know I was living in the apartment in early 87 and I had all kinds of Holy Right stuff at the time. So
now you got me thinking of another band. I don't know if you're going to mention them.
Probably.
So keep going.
Okay. This is one I know nothing about, but I remember buying it because the cover looked cool and I saw it in a magazine and I loved the album. So when I started buying vinyl again a couple years ago, I tracked one down. Hard rock with metallic feelings. I won't say much. I don't know much about the band. I don't think they've done anything beyond this. I think I bought this just because it looked cool and ended up sounding cool, and I wore it out back in the day. And then I'm going to mention this last one, Sacred Fire.
Oh, wow. I haven't seen that forever.
Yeah, and as we know, Jimmy here went on to do all kinds of other work. He's worked with Rex Carroll. He's, they did the whole King James album with Robert Sweet and Tim Gaines and all those. But
what does that sound like?
It's commercial hard rock. Not like I Don't Cure, but maybe a little edgier, a little more guitar.
Okay.
More like Breakaway. I don't know. It's hard to say. Other funny moment, which I believe I might have mentioned in our last video, is they were at Cornerstone 87. I was right in the stage front watching them, and I ran into this long hair weirdo guy with an upside down name tag that said Doug Van Pelt. So I met Doug in 87 at Cornerstone in front of the Sacred Fire stage.
That's hilarious.
And so that was and I knew who he was because of the magazine, because I've been buying the magazine since probably 86. So
yeah, that's amazing.
The only other one I wanted to mention, which it doesn't get much press, and I had kind of forgot it came out back then, and that's the Motherload album, because they're not really considered a Christian band, but this is 100% a Christian album. They have went on to do other things, and of course, Sonny's done another Motherload album in the past 10 years, and Sonny is a Christian singer that has done a lot of other stuff with the guys from Leviticus and stuff. So
XT and I love Sonny Larson's vocals.
I totally forgot this was 87, 86. I was thinking it was maybe later, but then I remember, no, I had this back in around 88. So
you know what? I have never heard that album.
Really? And this is a CD that was reissued in like 95. And so there's actually 5 bonus tracks. So it's like even more. You got, 15 tracks. It's just an amazing melodic metal with songs that are blatantly Christian and songs that are not, because they were kind of on that.
Yeah.
Anyway.
No, that's amazing. That's amazing. Well, folks, you got anything else?
I mean, I got some other things that were just back in the day. Okay, I'm just gonna say back in the day, we were grasping for anything that was hard rock, and there were. I'm gonna mention one other one, Rick Kua. We mentioned them in '85 because Doug mentioned them. This is absolutely probably my favorite Rick Kua album, and this is the one, and it's the only one I don't have on vinyl because it's not so easy to find, or maybe it's just I haven't bought it yet, but I got all the other ones. And you were right on the last video. We mentioned it. I think it stayed in there. The previous couple albums by this have never been released on CD. I was wrong when I said I think they had been. They're only on vinyl and cassette. This is on vinyl and cassette, and it was on CD. And I really want this. This is actually an import.
I had an original Sparrow back in, from back in the day, and I sold it, which I'm kind of regretting that I did. Okay, wait a minute. Show that to me again.
It says Sparrow, but it says made in the UK.
That's not an import. That is
The way
that's it. I mean, because
it's skip free. It's guaranteed skip free.
So back then, like the Bloodgood, the original Bloodgood CD I have, it was pressed in Japan, but that's because that's where the press plant was, not because it was an import. That's just where it was made.
Well, that's how a lot of them are now, because like the Czech Republic, and there's a couple pressing plants. Almost every record these days, I think even all the reissues that Gerd and them are doing, they're not over here. There's a place in California, I believe there's one out there that might still work, but most everything's overseas. And yeah, that's confusing to people when it says made in the Czech Republic, but that just means it was manufactured there. It was released in America, and they, purchased it there. Two more, just two more. I just want to get only because we've been talking hard rock and metal, but punk made its debut in the Christian scene in those days. We have power pop punk with the Altar Boy.
Yes.
We have the One Bad Pig. It just, these are just, they're both kind of pop punk, but this is a little more aggressive. And again, back in the day, we were looking for anything Christian with an edge, and these were on my turntable all the time. Punk has to be, and we're going to go with Undercover too, but Undercover, this is really more of an alternative rock album.
That album, which shame on me for not just mentioning it as a honorable mention. Some of the songs on there, Come Away With Me, I'm Just a Man.
I'm Just a Man, yeah.
But Come Away With Me, and then there are a couple of songs that are so worshipful that it's an absolutely, and then it's edgy as all get out because of Jim's guitar, and it is a classic album.
And they were coming off, because the earlier stuff, this is where they changed singers, and they went from being pop punk,
surfy,
to more alternative. The vocals are deeper, and it's a little less of that pop punk feel.
Yeah.
This is where they change sounds, and all the following albums, most of the following albums they just get better and better and better. Yeah, that one is the one that was just reissued on vinyl. It's just amazing. I would have to say the only album by them that is just, I have never been able to listen to the entire thing, is the very last album.
Forum? No, there's another one. I have it. I can't remember what it's called now.
I Rose or something. I Rose.
Yeah, Jim sent it to me when I did a video on Undercover. After he saw it, I was like, oh no, I have never heard that. And he's got a new project thing called Moral Decay, which kind of fits the same kind of stuff. It's pretty good. I've got that. I got a CD of that around here. But Undercover, for hard rock and metal, if you liked The Cult, if you liked, some of these other English type bands, to me, it was always the guitar. And his guitar, he's a great guitar player.
Saw him at Cornerstone. Saw him at Cornerstone '87 too. He was playing with Steve Taylor, so he played. Wow. He was on stage for both of them. So yeah. Anyway, but that's all I wanted to mention. You had to give a little throw into punk, because Christian metal is bad enough, but when you start talking Christian punk, I'm sure they got a lot of flack. And they were some of the cutting edge ones. Now that wasn't the first Altar Boys album, but that one's a little more commercial. But that one,
that was on Frontline.
Played it to death back in the day. Us in the dorm room, living in the dorm rooms. It was all on our turntables.
Some great stuff back then. Well, folks, there you have it. A huge, long laundry list of stuff. Hey, what are your top 5 or 10 releases from 1986?
Stuff just kept going.
Yeah. put those in the comments below. We want to know, hey, we're going to keep doing these. Hopefully in the future, somebody will be able to get Doug back in, some of the other guys from the crew.
Now, one of the other guys from the crew who could not be here did submit his top 5. He didn't stray much from where we are, but Lloyd gives us Saint, Bloodgood, Barren Cross, Messiah Prophet, Stryper, and guess what his honorable mention was? Daniel Band.
Okay.
So you can see that
there
there are people in the crew that are just like us.
Absolutely. Well, folks, hope you enjoyed the show. Don't forget to check out Heaven's Metal Magazine, heavensmetalmagazine.com, as well as Heaven's Metal Streaming Radio. It's on the Live 365 platform, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So until next time, for Jeff McCormack, I'm Keven Crothers. Don't forget to say your prayers, and God bless.
We'll be back later.
See you in the next video.